right, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about something that has taken over the whole world. It is currently the top grossing film of the year 2022, and that is The Batman. And we're talking about it with someone who's been on the podcast with us before. If you go back to episode number 86, we had him on to talk about Korriban and some politics in Star Wars. But Gabe Young is back with us today. He is a big Batman fan, as we all are big Batman fans, and we think we can tie this into Star Wars. So we thought, what better way to do it than to have Gabe back? We'll get into the Cape Crusader, get into a little bit of Star Wars, and have some fun. So Gabe, welcome back onto the podcast. Why don't you tell everyone listening a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, what's going on, everyone? Thank you so much for having me again, Brian and Cassia. Super excited to be back. I know I shared about myself last time, but again, my name is Gabe, or Gabriel. I go by he, his, him pronouns, and ever since I can remember as a little kid, I've been a Batman fan. If Anakin wasn't my first Halloween costume, it was probably Batman.
Oh,
and
nice.
I've dove into the Cape Crusaders adventures, not just in comics, but video games, film, TV shows. My first favorite TV show, aside from Star Wars Clone Wars, was probably Batman the Animated Series. And just the fact that just so much from the comic lore was tied into that animated show is what really gave me that in-depth mindset of Batman's psyche, and really kept me onto it. And sharing my own experience as someone who has lost his father at a very young age and was raised by a single mother, I felt like Batman's own trauma was something that I can relate to, and his sense for justice, equity, and fairness is something so notable that makes his crusade against injustice so, I'd say valiant. There we go. But yeah,
Okay,
thanks so
yeah.
much for having me, and that's why I'm a huge Batman fan, as for me, as someone who wants to make the world a better place, I see myself in Batman, as I'm sure many of us do. So, again, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks again for coming on, Gabe. It's always great to hear what you say. You're such a good thinker, and I know you're going to do a great many things. Oh, wait, that's kind of a Palpatine quote, but I mean it like in a good way. Like, yeah.
That's right, yeah. A positive
Yeah.
Palpatine.
We
quote,
will
yeah.
watch your career with great interest.
That's right. Yeah, that's awesome. Like I said, you're a big Batman fan. You know, we've both really enjoyed Batman. That animated series, that was great. I remember, getting home from school, watching that. Of course, you have, the iconic voice actor Mark Hamill in there playing the Joker. All that stuff was really good. I never really was a big, comic book kid, but I always really liked, comic book characters and stories. I always really liked the old, Superman films, and I actually really liked the Batman TV series, from 1966. I remember I would get home, from college, or I would get back from a break, and I would watch, and I don't know, it must have been on TV Land or TBS or something, and they were just playing the old ones. So I would go home and eat lunch and watch through those. That old Adam West Batman, which is very campy and very, very different from the 2022 Batman,
Very, yes.
in all ways. But Batman is this really great character, and he's had kind of all of these different iterations. So really, however you like your Batman, there's definitely a Batman story that's been told that you can identify with. But what about you, Cassia? What is your kind of background history with the Cape Crusader here?
I think you mean my background.
I did
one.
not mean that. No.
I love puns, probably too much, and yeah, but some bat memories I have of Batman.
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of highlight, you mentioned the 1966 Adam West TV show. William Dozier, who kind of headed that show, he is an alumni, or he was an alumni of my alma mater. So if you're a nerd, you can look that up.
There you go.
But and it's funny because I was kind of reading an article about him, and he's because he's never really read comic books before, and he read a dozen to read on a flight to LA, and then he was like, this is a quote from the article, "This was ridiculous and ancient basic material," he would later say. And it's like, I think that's loving, you know, like, because comics, like, it's so funny because, like, current popular culture is like Batman versus DC, and it's like, this guy really doesn't get it. He doesn't get Aquaman, and it's like, Aquaman is a man who talks to dolphins, and I think in some comics he actually dated a dolphin. Like, and like some people, sometimes we get like so. Sometimes like people can get toxic about it, but I'm like, it does connect with us. Like these characters, like it's kind of like Star Wars, you know, like. I probably, you know, like Star Wars too much, and that's, you know, like, it's just, like, I love Star Wars, and, like, that's kind of how I see, like, archetypal stories, and, like, superheroes are kind of like that. And it's okay to have fun with them, and it's okay to take them, like, seriously. We just kind of find the golden mean, you know, like, not too much, not too little, you know, just have fun with it. But that was kind of like, I guess Kreia has kind of inspired me, I guess, as we kind of think about KOTOR 2. But I didn't really know much about Batman growing up because, like, I would just kind of see the Batman cartoons on, but, like, I was kind of like, it's kind of how it was a little bit with Star Wars. Like, it was okay to, like certain things, but, like, you couldn't like it, like, in some ways, like, if you were a girl. So, like, I didn't really come to know what Superman, like, who Superman was or Batman was until, like, Superman was Smallville, you know? Like...
Right, sure. Yeah.
I unironically loved everything about that, you know? All 10 seasons, you know? And, like, Batman Begins, it's an interesting movie. Like, it's kind of what started off, like, the grim, dark, you know, kind of gritty reboot, you know? Kind of craze going on. Actually, maybe still going on to an extent, even though I think it's kind of switched from, like, dark, gritty reboot to nostalgia in the last few years. But it's kind of a different take. It's, like, kind of, like, taking the mythos and, like, kind of making it a little bit more realistic. So, like, it's kind of like I was getting Batman through, like, the Nolan lens, and it got me interested in him. And I guess what I like is, like, Batman are his villains. He has the best rogues gallery, and I loved playing Arkham City, like, and each of his villains are so iconic and unique, and, like, they all kind of, like, carry, like, different aspects of his personality. Like, if he took it too far, like, if he relied on his wealth too much, he would turn into Penguin. Like, if he was just too random and left things to chance, he could be, like, Two-Face, you know?
My own Batman research and history and whatnot, like, seeing how he first came from Detective Comics to now. I talk about this all the time with friends and family, but, like, it's crazy how Batman has transformed from his grounded personality that we see of, and especially in the movie it's shown this, of wanting to just carry out vigilante justice, and then turning into a superhero, a symbol for hope. And whenever I, like, dive into the Arkham games, I've played it ever since I was young, or even the Batman animated series with The Rise of Sun Tzu. We've always seen Batman in so many different fashions from the Silver Age. Like, there's a Batman for everyone, as he said, and I think that's what makes Batman so relatable, is that we consider him a superhero, but he doesn't have any powers. And I don't know how more human you can get from calling a superhero a human being. Because, like, you know, each in our daily lives, we carry our own traumas and obstacles in life. Yet, as Cassie, you mentioned, like, I think going back to Alan Moore's The Killing Joke, like, if we really internalize one bad day can reduce the sanest man to lunacy, we can really turn into the Joker and go down that darker path. And kind of tying it back into Star Wars, that one bad day can definitely represent Anakin's own flaw, that he had that one bad day and turned to the dark side and to lunacy. And it really talks about that internal human struggle we have with processing our own human emotions and how it's important for us to confide and love other people. And I think that's what makes Batman great, is that he eventually learns, like, if you go into the Lego Batman movie, he can't do it himself. He needs other people to help him out, and the real Bruce Wayne is Bruce Wayne when he's with the Bat family. So that was amazing, like, that you mentioned that, Cassie, that, like, we are Batman.
Yeah.
All of us are Batman, and there's no such thing as gatekeeping Batman for anyone and everyone.
Yeah. And there's no gatekeeping Aquaman, so
Yeah. Don't gatekeep Aquaman, and don't keep Batman. Actually, just don't gatekeep anyone. On a side note, but yeah, that's really interesting thing you just talked about there, that we can all be Batman, and like we talked about a little bit. There's all these different kind of aspects of Batman. I personally like Batman as the detective, the solving crimes and processing crime scenes. Right before we hopped on, we were talking a little bit about the Telltale Batman game, and that's pretty heavily a part of that game, which I found to be interesting. What about you? I guess Cassie, let's start with you. What is it about Batman that you can identify that you really like? Is it the gadgets or the cool car, or what about Batman do you find most intriguing, or you can kind of identify with the most, I guess?
When I was doing my undergrad, I was talking with my roommate who had lost her mother to cancer, and I was like, I don't get it. Like, I can understand, like, Batman, like, losing his parents, but then, like, he turns it into his whole identity, and it's a crusade, and, like, she's like, you don't understand, and, like, she's like, it really, like, scars you as a person, so it's something, like, I didn't quite understand, but, like, I think it speaks to a lot of people's experiences, like, Gabe included, just, like, kind of, like, taking loss and transforming it into a crusade to make something better, and, like, maybe there were better ways that he could do it, but I think, like, in the end, like, him being Batman in Gotham is probably more of a good thing than a bad thing. And so it's just, like, the mentality of Batman, like, his psychology kind of, like, gets me interested in his character. And, like, that's what I can kind of connect with. I can't really connect with him being, like, super rich or, like, super, like, buff, like, punching everyone, And, like, also, like, as I kind of mentioned, his rogues gallery, iconic, and, like, they're all kind of, like, offshoots of him, Like, in a way, like, offshoots of, like, different maybe I shouldn't say that, like offshoots of, like, different personality types, like, taken to extremes that Batman could take himself to, so I guess those are some of the thoughts I had.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, Gabe, what about you? Anything in particular about Batman, and kind of any of these iterations, or is there one sort of version of Batman that you are really drawn to, or something about Batman or the stories that they tell that you can really sort of identify with and grasp onto, and, like I said, see yourself in kind of these roles, I guess?
Yeah, I would say really the Batman that I relate to the most would probably be any iteration of Jim Lee's artwork of him, for one, and I think Jeff Johns' Batman. Like, Jeff Johns' stories are just so salient, understanding human trauma. And that's what relating to Cassia is my favorite part about Batman. I know I mentioned my background before, but as I mentioned before on the podcast too, that although Star Wars was a coping mechanism, superheroes, let alone Batman, was a coping mechanism. And in the wake of my father's death and needing inspiration of where to channel my anger and frustration with the idea of death, I really didn't know where to place it. And I could either project onto other people and be rude, off-put, aloofish, and isolate myself and become reclusive, or I can choose to be better. And we see this throughout any superhero, especially Batman, that we choose, or I chose to be a man for and with others, someone to be in solidarity with the poor while trying to help others. And I think in Jeff Johns' portrayal of the character, especially with the Battle for the Cowl storyline, we see that so many people grieve after Batman is gone, or Bruce is gone, because although, yes, Bruce has so much money, Bruce decides to use his money not as a one-off philanthropic venture that we see within our billionaires and 2% of society, but instead he invests in himself to actually take himself off his pedestal and go down and sacrifice his life for those who can't. One particular thing that comes to mind that I see so many people talking about in the Asian American community, and as an Asian American myself, is the opening shot of literally the Batman movie, where that was inspired, where the character is inspired by Frank Miller's Year One and Jeff Johns' depiction of the character, the more brooding type, where Batman could easily stay in his tower, as everyone can see, like as Bruce, but instead he chooses to go into a subway fight, save an Asian American man's life who he doesn't even know, despite the Asian American man calling for help and standing up for people, let alone the marginalized and minorities of society. And I think that's what stands out to me about Batman, is that he uses that trauma of loss of a loved one and the love that his parents have given him, just like my father has given to me, and transforms that to be someone who can be a man for and with others, and be someone who can make the world, let Gotham, a better place, through standing up for people when no one else can. I also think it's great, like, as Batman as a concept, as a social commentary, is like, what's blows my mind is the note that, there's only so much that one man can do, yet he's not afraid to put his life on the line and to realize that the only way you can really serve others in a kind of Christian sense is to really give your whole self to people and to put your body in the way of someone else's blows, because by taking that hit, you're saving someone and really serving someone. And just that altruistic aspect of Batman is what has made me a fan of him till today.
Yeah, no, definitely good stuff. Very well said there. And that's kind of one of the big themes we got out of both the Christopher Nolan trilogy, and then this Matt Reeves version of Batman is really kind of, hitting on those points of, Bruce Wayne, being selfless and making these sacrifices that he wouldn't have to necessarily, that, anyone else might not necessarily make. And, that's one of the really interesting things about the character, definitely that he's willing to, give up this lavish lifestyle and, in pursuit of justice and doing that. And I really liked, and we'll talk about the new Batman here in a minute, but, it really kind of talks about, especially in the opening kind of act of that movie, Bruce Wayne, Batman, talking about how, Batman as a persona has to be bigger than just himself, because like you'd said, Gabe, you can't be everywhere. You can't do everything. You can't protect everyone. but the idea of you can. And I think that that's really neat, kind of, beyond the boundaries of Batman or superhero things. It's building up, this persona of doing good in the world, and letting that shadow you and, hopefully live on past, our time here with, doing good deeds and taking care of people in your communities and things like that.
Yeah, very well said, Brian.
Let's I guess we should probably see if we can tie this back into Star Wars though a little bit. So Cassia, I'm gonna throw out this argument here, and then I'm gonna let you kind of run with it. See if I make any sense. If you can make heads or tails of this. No two-faced pun intended there.
I was about to be like, that's a two-faced pun, just
That's right.
for the people listening at home.
It's pun central. I don't know if there is a pun villain in Batman or not, but I do know that the main villain of Batman, of course, is the Joker. That's the one everyone knows and has been in pretty much all of the Batman media over all of these years. And if you do any kind of like research or really like digging into Batman as a character, and what these villains mean, Batman and the Joker are often pitted as kind of the opposite sides of the same coin, almost as a dyad, if you will, or as the kind of that linear path of the Jedi and the Sith. Just one step's one way, one step's the other way. But what do you think about that? Would the Batman and the Joker be good representations of Jedi and the Sith? What do you think?
That is a very interesting question.
Thank you.
I think Batman is maybe a bit more like someone who is using systems but not necessarily serving a system, if that makes sense. Like, it's a little bit more like, I don't really think Grey Jedi exists anymore, but like kind of like Grey Jedi, and maybe like Revan would be kind of like a Batman. Like, he does the kind of like the more edgy things that like goody two-shoe Jedi probably wouldn't do. The Joker, I think he's a little bit too random to quite be a Sith. But maybe he's kind of like, I don't know, because Sith are kind of like not necessarily like hedonistic, but they kind of like serve their like base pleasures. And like, for me, like, Joker's a little bit too random. Like, it would be hard to be like, this character in Star Wars is kind of like the Joker. But that does get my mind turning for like a future episode we are probably going to do, like incorporating Batman and KOTOR characters. But did you have an idea, Gabe?
Yeah. So first, going into the movies, I think the quote that can best describe it is when Snoke's saying, "When darkness rises and light to meet it." Because, and then he furthers this, "I warned my young apprentice that as he grew stronger, his equal in the light would rise," when he talks to Rey in The Last Jedi. Because if you look at Nolan's Dark Knight, Joker says, "I don't want to kill you, I need you, you complete me." And I wrote an essay about this, where what makes the Batman and Joker dynamic so great, or the reason why I'd say that Dark Knight is considered the best superhero movie of all time, is the reason why it rose to prestige. That it used film in its literature sense to convey that the duality of man will always have good and evil to them. And where I'm going with this is that Batman, in a sense, represents good, although he kind of supersedes the law, which in a way is like kind of in a gray area. He represents the goodness of people wanting to serve others, altruism, whereas the Joker represents chaos and and evil in a sense. And that's kind of this pendulum, if you will, that if good strikes, evil must happen. When evil happens, good must happen as well. And it's a balancing act that the spiritual energies, or the force, like, literally has to balance out by creating these said dyads. And bringing it into KOTOR, I think the best way to see is looking at KOTOR 2, where Mitra, the exile, is a wound in the force. And her counterpart, being the wound of the force, would be nihilism. And Mitra represents that part of the force that, despite her committing mass death with the mass shadow generator at Malachor 5, she chose to walk away, and hence why she lost her connection to the force, but she came back to serve people. And just as she grew stronger in light side canonically, unless you're a dark side fan playthrough, Nihilus too rose in power. And that is where I think Kreia talks about too, that when you're in Nar Shaddaa, like, there's like no such thing as good or evil in her sense, because this frustrating cycle of the duality of man is what frustrates everyone. And so when we tie it back to Batman, and try to find that gray area, kind of the best Batman character is Revan and Ahsoka, where Revan chose to be the prodigal knight, if you will, just like Batman is called the Dark Knight. Because Revan understands that when light rises, evil will too, and hence why he went into the unknown regions. And he takes it upon his own self without any guidance from anyone, just like how Batman doesn't take any guidance from the police force or government, to go and do the right thing, to sacrifice his own life so others can keep moving. Whereas a counterpart for him would definitely be Vitiate in SWTOR, where Vitiate is more like the Joker, that he doesn't really care about what's going on. He just wants power to rule, in a sense, and to create that galactic chaos for him to rise to power. And looking at Ahsoka and then more media, that Ahsoka chooses to walk away from systems. Even in the Justice League cartoon, when the Justice League tells Batman that they're going to the government to reveal their identity, Batman says no, that he's a part-timer, just like Ahsoka in Rebels goes, oh, I'm no Jedi, and she's fighting Anakin on Malachor. And so
Yeah.
it's this concept that the duality of man, I think, and hence why like no one loves confronting it because it's so frustrating, is ever present within media and shows that greater sense of what it means to be human. And hence, again, where I'm going back to my argument that Batman represents humanity in a sense, and hence the Joker, as a facet of Batman, also represents that side of humanity, where in the state of nature we are unafraid to let our own inhibitions of chaos run loose. So, yeah. There you go.
I've learned so much just listening to you. I'm amazed. Like, you're such a good thinker, and I hope you know that. Like, it's kind of helping me kind of improve as a person, I guess, just like hearing about Batman. So, you're good at what you do.
I mean, as much as I would love to take the credit, I'd love to also give you both credit, not just for providing a space, but also for listening. And throughout your podcast, I've mentioned that what makes this space so great is that understanding of humanity in Star Wars, and understanding of humanity in pop culture. And so I want to give you two credit and shout out everyone who has taught me and gone before, because I, just as every Padawan needs a master, what you see here from me is accredited to all the masters who have gone before me and all my mentors. So the credit doesn't belong with me, but to everyone who's brought me to where I am today. So, but yeah, just wanted to clarify that it's not just me.
Yeah.
I am all the Jedi, if you will.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I like that. No, that's definitely something, that we like to do, is to, make sure we are doing our best at least to bring on different ideas and different voices and things, because there's a lot of things we can learn about, and Star Wars obviously is what the podcast that we do is covering by and large, but kind of in all fandoms and all sorts of media and literature and things, there are many ways to interpret something, and everyone's going to be able to put their own kind of personal backgrounds and experiences into those stories. So you definitely get lots of different viewpoints, and I think it's important to kind of see where everyone's coming with those. So definitely great, and definitely love having you on for stuff like that. But let's to get back to Batman here. I have a note, and it says the Batman / Empire Strikes Back / KOTOR 2. So that leads me to believe, Gabe, that you have something up your sleeve where Empire Strikes Back and the Batman are correlate somehow. And I think that's very right. So what do you think? Empire Strikes Back, 1980. One of the greats of all time for sure. Batman, one of the great comic book superheroes of all time. Take it away. What kind of parallels should we be seeing in these stories?
The parallels, I'd say, is both heroes lost. Like, in all honesty, if you look at Reeves's Batman, Gotham got flooded. He was not smart enough. He was not prepared enough. He didn't train hard enough. He was too caught up in his own mission that he didn't see the bigger picture. And in KOTOR 2, that is similar, where Mitra has to deal with her own loss of killing all those people with the mass shadow generator, and not realizing that Kreia was the one who was really playing behind the scenes. So for me, I would like to convey that the Batman conveys that one must, and I wrote this down. I'm just trying to find, it's like all in notes, but one must understand and help oneself before they help other people. And that is where I go with Empire, where one must understand themselves too before they help other people. Because I'd say the climax of Empire comes when Luke decides to abandon his training with Yoda because of the premonition that he must fight Vader and save his friends. When, like, we as an audience, we know it's a trap, but if we understand Luke, Luke himself wants to give himself up to people. He, just as Bruce tells Alfred, like, I thought I've conquered death, I'm not afraid of anything. It's similar to Luke, where he's like, I'm not afraid of Vader, I can take him. Just as Bruce is like, I can handle himself. And it's the same dialogue options you have from Mitra, saying, like, of course he can be compassionate and credit everyone, but Mitra is really like, I can do it myself. And she's so influenced by Kreia saying that you can do it yourself, that it leads to one's downfall. When we look in the initiating action of the Batman, we are placed behind a voyeurist perspective. And we are looking through the Riddler's goggles in this sense, but we are peering into someone's psyche to understand someone. First we see the guard, and how we guard our own feelings and don't let anyone in. Because what we're looking into is someone's most private space, their house. And there's a great saying where it's someone's house represents someone's own mindset and their capacity. And so we transition from the security guard to the nuns. And the nuns are outside of the person's mindset who we're looking into. And so nuns representing like religion and good is outside of that factor. And then we look into a window, where a window is supposed to be the person's mindset looking into the outside world, and we see a child dressed as a ninja, but is so violent and just trying to fight everything it sees. And like, even though it strikes the father, runs away and comes back, it embraces the parents that are there. And so the movie that we're seeing in the Batman is a character study versus an epic. And although The Empire Strikes Back is more of an epic, diving into the Batman gives us the idea of what Luke was going through in Empire, where we see a child, like going back to A New Hope, we see a child who's ready to blast anything in its path and to fight, but just is longing for the love and compassion of her parents and wanting to do something, something greater. And so, similar to Kodar 2, where Mitra's own secrets are guarded behind rule of law and what is supposedly supposed to be good, but Mitra just needed the connections to understand her own grief and process, just like Luke needed the connection of his friends, or like of Yoda, in order to understand and grieve and process that if he continues to be arrogant, impatient, and I'd say just blind, all for quote unquote the greater good, then he himself will turn into Vader, like we see in the Dagobah scene. So kind of tying it all in together, I feel that the Batman mostly resembles Luke's arc in Empire Strikes Back. Because at the end of Empire Strikes Back, we see hope. Mark Hamill even just admitted to everyone that scene was like shot first after principal photography, and that hope is the same hope that Batman gives after the entire movie. In the beginning of the movie, Batman starts off as fear, vengeance, something to fight back against everyone. But at the end of the movie, he says, like, we need to be something greater. I need to be something greater. And the parallel scenes from the beginning and the end of Batman is Batman looking up into the rain in the dark versus Batman all muddied looking up into a bright sky. And that contrasts with Luke's own perspective in the beginning of the movie, where he's looking into a blizzard in Hoth. But at the end of the movie, he's looking at the light of the galaxy, that there's an opportunity to, even though he sacrificed, to be something greater. And eventually we see that in Return of the Jedi. But I digress. That is why I think that the Batman is closest tied to Empire Strikes Back's themes, character study, and Kodar 2.
Yeah. No, I love that a lot. And just as you were talking, what I was thinking of is just kind of the character journeys of both the Batman, particularly in this new one, the Matt Reeves version, and in Empire Strikes Back. You have two characters who are kind of going on these journeys, being fueled by kind of the memories and the endearment that they're holding on for. For Luke, it's his father. For Batman, it's his parents. And then at the end of the films, or near the end of the films, they're kind of learning the truth about those figures, and that they were they were flawed just like everyone else. They weren't perfect, but that doesn't negate the good that you're doing in their name. So I see a big parallel there in the characters for myself. But Cassie, what about you? Do you see any kind of parallels here between Bruce Wayne, the Batman, and Empire Strikes Back, or really any kind of hero's journey, Star Wars story type of things?
I mean, it's funny you mentioned parallels, because I think I've kind of mentioned this a bit. Empire definitely explores parallelism, and I'm glad that we're not just saying like, oh, Empire is like the Batman because it's so dark. My voice is kind of going dark right now. I have a little bit of a cold, but we'll have a Batman voice off later, and I'll win because I was going to say, yeah,
we're not doing our Batman voices yet, so you have to hold on for another minute or two.
Yeah, so I'm trying to rein in the voice, but yeah, so parallelism and Batman really does represent a lot of duality. I mean, even with kind of comparing the Riddler and Batman, I was talking with someone about this, Batman and the Riddler were both scarred, orphaned as children, but they definitely are on different sides of the spectrum, I would say. Maybe maybe would Batman be chaotic good, and then what would the Riddler be? Like chaotic evil or lawful evil? I don't know. Like,
I would say
What
that
do you think?
Batman is more. Yeah, Batman is definitely chaotic good. Maybe
or maybe neutral
maybe
good.
neutral
I don't
good.
know.
Actually, you're right. Maybe neutral good, because even though he shouldn't be a vigilante, he still upholds the rule of law.
Yeah.
But Riddler is chaotic good because, like, he had good intentions to like root out the corruption in Gotham, but good intentions does not excuse murdering people or like blowing up the seawall, because I've talked to a lot of people about this, but they felt that at the end of the movie, like, Riddler's intentions were kind of oxymoronic, because he wanted to represent the lowest of the law and the minority, and like, I think that interrogation scene is perfect when he talks about that. But yet, like, who would suffer the most from blowing up the seawalls it's the minority, where we see
Yeah.
Penguin and we know Rain Tower is so high, you're flooding the streets of Gotham, leading to more people becoming poor. And so, yeah, there you go, chaotic good right then and there. Like, good intentions, terrible execution.
Yeah. Yeah, the Riddler, I don't know, like, when I was watching the movie, it made me very uncomfortable. Because, like, it kind of, like, it would, like, show the Riddler, like, on, I don't know if they call it TikTok or, like, whatever
Twitch.
they're using. But I'm like, I don't know, maybe this
Yeah.
is, like, this could give, like, the wrong people the wrong ideas, you know? Like, we live in a society, you
We
know?
live in a
and-
society.
yeah.
Yeah.
And guns just kind of scare me. So, like, maybe it was a great film, you know, but it just was a little too intense and long for this little Cassia. But
No worries. I think you brought up
yeah.
something very salient there, and I want to mention again my film teacher from high school. He argues that the Batman movies were made as political commentary to the politics of their time. And diving into this, I'll shout him out at www.gormontfilmwriter.com. He argues that the Nolan films are representative of Obama's presidency and administration. That Batman
Yeah.
Begins was made in 2005, 2006?
2005.
And
yeah.
that was when
Yeah.
Obama had the speech of, like, we're not the red states, we're not the blue states, we are the United States. And what the world needed in the looming feeling of being in the forever wars is a symbol of hope. And that's what Batman gave us. Nolan was trying to communicate that we need to look at hope and a greater future. Then 2008 is the financial crisis. And
Yeah.
it feels like it's chaotic. It feels like the Joker is running the world. And Obama, of course, was elected, but has to fight that duality where, with everything collapsing around him, what can you do? What must be done? And Obama takes the fall, just as Batman takes the fall for fighting back Harvey Dent, where there's so much chaos around, we must be the light in the darkness. We must be that dark knight. And in 2012, The Dark Knight Rises came around, and with so much of the forever wars going around, and eventually Obama's looming end of, like, his presidency and whatnot, or his first term, it was a response to that, where it's like, with so much terrorism in the world and people saying that they can do a better job than you, what can you do? And it showed that Obama's response was eventually to run again, and to show that even though there's chaos and whatnot, violence is never the answer, or to control people is never the answer, but to allow them to have that ability to understand and choose for themselves. And now when we look at today, we see the dark web and QAnon, and kind of getting a bit into political sensitivity and deep water. The argument that my teacher made was the Batman represents the politics of America right now, where if we substitute the Riddler's name for QAnon and see him streaming messages to fight back, revolt against your government, we will literally see January 6th happen again, where we must storm a square garden and demand our politicians to be killed. And we literally see that in the Batman movie. And so Batman kind of represents us as the American population. What can we do? We must break action and actually speak up to the times around us and to fight back against this misinformation, just like the Riddler was spreading, and to clear up everyone's mindsets that we must be a better people and to kill people, to use violence, and as Batman says, like, vengeance isn't the answer anymore. Like, at the end of the movie, I must be something better. We must be better, and we have to find other means of doing so. And the reason why I bring up this argument is it's similar to Star Wars' arguments at the time too. When Star Wars was made, it's a rebelling group fighting against a tyrannical government, or an authoritarian government. And what can we see from that is tactics similar to how the Vietnamese in the Vietnam War fought back against their own tyrannical authoritative government. And even Reagan's own program was called Star Wars as like a snippet of that, where people were fighting back and trying to revolt, trying to speak out. And in a way, our own leaders at the time in the 80s were representative of the emperor and militarized governments cracking down on people, as we see in Empire. And so, like, these films of Batman and Star Wars kind of represent a greater social commentary that it makes us uncomfortable, yes, because it is the sad reality we are living in. But we, just as Batman does, uses fear to do something greater and better. And as I was mentioning earlier, and kind of tying in everything together, Cassie, like, how you felt is totally valid, because that is how Matt Reeves wants us to feel. Yet, here you are still hosting this space and this podcast to have this uncomfortable conversation that this is our world. That the media that's created is not just kind of sugarcoating and putting a fresh paint on our world's problems, but allowing us to have discourse over what should we do next as people in this world. What are we called to be, and what are we called to do? And of course, like, that's up to everyone who's listening, but like, that human experience you give, Cassia, is so invaluable. And I think that's great for you to point out that these movies are so dark in that sense, and have the opportunity to create this dialogue like you are creating today. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and that's historically one of the things, specifically about comic books, is they've always been very reflective of the society and politics going on at the time. If you go back and read comic books back from all the way back 50s, 60s, all the way up to today, they've been very very reflective, and yeah, the Batman is very much the same. I'm old enough to remember the 1989 Batman when that came out, and you could see the same kind of parallels going on there, in the late 80s and stuff too, which kind of kicked off this Batman film universe that has been going on for quite some time now. But yeah, no, very very good points made there, Gabe, and I definitely can understand where Cassie is coming from, because I had a lot of the same feelings. So why don't we do that? Why don't we've talked about Batman now. We've talked about how it ties into Star Wars. But The Batman, it just came out a few weeks back. Like I said, it's currently sitting at the highest grossing film of the year so far. Probably no change in that coming up in the near future. But why don't we just give our little kind of, I guess, review of The Batman, what we thought about it, things we liked, things we didn't like. We don't have to go on. We've been talking about the movie kind of off and on here through these topics, but just a quick little rundown on what we thought about the film. And I guess who wants to start? Cassie, do you wanna go first? What's your Batman review? Did Gabe change your mind and tip the needle up a little bit there in his retort? Or
Oh, he definitely did. I think like for me, where I live, it's kind of a chore and a half to go to an IMAX screen. So I have to be very particular about getting tickets, driving there, getting there on time. And I did enjoy the film. I kind of have like been fluctuating between a 3 and a 4. And it was a great film. Like, was it like kind of like what seeing Dune was for me? No, but like every shot was shot with such care, and like the cinematography. If this doesn't get a nod, I'm gonna be mad. You know, like it was an amazing.
It's still early
film.
in the year. It's still early in the
Yeah.
year. It is beautiful though.
Yeah, I think it's just because like some things that kind of touch on real life kind of made me uncomfortable, because that's kind of the intention, you know, like kind of, you know, maybe I didn't enjoy it as much as some other people, but I appreciate its like technical craft and everything that went into it. And I'm sure like given time, once I kind of process, you know, kind of like what it says about trauma, mental health, and like it is an uncomfortable reflection of our world, and innocents, you know, have to like endure like the actions of evil people, you know, and like sometimes it's just like you can't really see like what the point of like senseless suffering is, you know, like and that's like a Batman movie, you know, like so I'm glad we are getting like we're able to talk about like all of this coming out of like a comic book movie. So if more superhero films are kind of at this level, I think it's good, you know, to kind of heighten what people can expect. And so like somewhere between a 3 and a 4 for me, but like the acting was great. I can't think of any kind of static acting. The cinematography was great. I did think it was maybe a little bit long, but like I'm kind of one of those old-fashioned people that is like an hour and 30 minutes, nothing more, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, that's not how it goes. So like maybe it could have been a little bit shorter, but I think like what kind of stood out to me the most is like earlier on in the movie, you kind of see the buildup of the Batman, and it's kind of like not quite a hallway scene, but it's a buildup. He just walks closer, you know, and you hear it, and he's just intense, kind of like staring at you with a bat stare, you know, like Robert Pattinson just like owns it, you know, and I'm like, oh, I'm not even like, you know, a criminal in that situation, but I'm scared, you know, and
Right.
you kind of just see him like say like I'm vengeance, you know, and then when he is trying to rescue Catwoman, and he kind of like uses like green steroids that probably have no relation with Bane, you know, you know, to kind of like give him a boost, you know. He kind of is just like punching this rogue cop, and he asks who the rogue cop is, and he says, I'm vengeance. That's what the cop says, and then he just kind of sees himself reflected in that person, and then you kind of just see in Batman's eyes, like, he's on the line. He could go either way, and Gordon says, like, who are you? And he backs up from the line, because he realizes he was like, he could have gone too far. He was going too far, but he was cognizant enough to make the choice to change.
Yeah, no, I share a lot of those same sentiments as you. I think when my Letterboxd, I think I gave this a 3.5 stars. I think talking with Gabe, I'd probably bump that up a little bit. But
Yeah.
kind of my kind of big complaint. Well, it wasn't necessarily that it was too long, but it felt like the last kind of act was a little bit kind of counterintuitive to what we'd seen. For me, I've always really liked the Riddler as one of the villains, so I was excited to see his take on it. And through the first 2/3 of the film, I liked it a lot, kind of his motives and the way he was carrying it out. But then by the end, to me at least, he was almost just as like a stand-in for a Joker type of a character. Like he didn't seem like the Riddler anymore to me. He seemed like the Joker and less like the Riddler. So I didn't love that. It's really, really bleak. Even in like The Dark Knight, which is also a really, really dark telling of a Batman story, there's still some moments of levity in it, and there are no moments of levity in this one. So I maybe could have used a little break from how bleak it is. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue with how beautiful it looks, how the acting was. Colin Farrell, as Oswald Copperpot, was great. Jeffrey Wright is incredible. I love him and basically everything that he does. John Turturro was really good as Carmine Falcone. So the acting was good. The way that it looked was good. The soundtrack, by and large, I liked a lot, and kind of the musical points to it. But yeah, so I'm gonna bump it up to a 4, and now I'm gonna turn it over to Gabe for the last word, and he can tell us why we're wrong. And this gets 5 stars, I think. So
Before that, Cassia, you want to mention something about the ending? I remember we chatted about it earlier.
Yeah. I guess, Brian, I understand what you said. It kind of felt bleak. But for me, like, this was the most hopeful ending that I feel like we've ever gotten out of a Batman film. And I was so surprised. Like, he's out in the daylight. Like, I mean, like, he's helping clean up, after a flood, and he's in the daylight just saving people. He's not intimidating criminals. And I was like so shocked at like how vulnerable like Batman was, and like just like how heroic he was. And I was like, wow, like that could have been someone, like helping clean up after a hurricane that we have all too often now. And I was just impressed with that. And I don't know if I quite bought the romantic chemistry between Batwoman and Catwoman at times, but I did feel like it was a deep connection. And I feel bad that I don't think I've mentioned Catwoman until now, but like I would say maybe she's the true neutral in this movie. And I found it so interesting that the Riddler's locked up, It's not a big punching fight at the end, like in the traditional sense. It's Batman trying to save people, and in some ways he fails, but they're in the inferno together, even though I guess it's not an inferno, it's a flood, the aquatic version of an inferno, and not quite a hurricane, but I'm just mad that I can't really come up with the right word at the time, but like they're helping other people, and it's like how many of those situations, like just randomly kind of happen, like earthquakes, hurricanes, random things like no one can predict, and it's not a big punching fight at the end. Like Batman doesn't outpunch Riddler, and in some ways like he fails when it comes to intellect, and it's kind of about the connection between Batwoman and Catwoman. So like, even though like romantically, I don't know if I kind of buy it completely. Like I was sold on their connection, and like I'll be rooting for them, like of course, like I'm gonna be like, yeah, and Batwoman and Catwoman, they're gonna like find love, one day, like once they kind of like deal with like some of their trauma more, and then they're in a better like headspace for a relationship. But yeah, I love the ending, and like how it's not just like a punch fight at the end, because I think I might have mentioned on one of our like episodes before, like writing MFA professor, we were talking about movies coming out, and like I think we were talking about Suicide Squad, like it was out at the time, and my professor says like, I'm just kind of like sick of like superhero films because they kind of just end with a big punching fight at the end. And I was like, well, actually, oh wait, that's true, but like for this one, I think it was kind of saying something about the society we're living in and like how we can respond to that.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, and my favorite Star Wars characters, this is where the fun begins. Right, so for me, out of 5, I would rate the Batman a 5 out of 5. And the reason I'm saying this is like I invite everyone to like kind of close their eyes and maybe picture yourself. But imagine you're 5 years old and you're scared of either the movie you're watching, you want to go home, you're just tired. And you step out of a theater, someone starts robbing your parents. Your dad steps right in front of you and says like, I'll handle this, like you don't have to do this, and he gets shot. Then your mother is like crying and whatnot, and then she gets shot right in front of your eyes, and of course the criminal who does it sees that you're just a 5-year-old kid and runs away, and all that remains around you is the blood, pearls, and rain and loneliness that your parents were just gunned down in front of you. And now I invite anyone to open their eyes if they did, but the reason why I mention this is that's traumatic. It's painful. It's harrowing. And the only person that Bruce has left after that happens is Alfred, who Alfred himself is someone on the Waynes' payroll who is there to help the family, is a butler. Yet he takes on the father role for Bruce. And so, in the many depictions of Batman or storytelling we see, the movies are told in an epic format instead of a singular character analysis format. And the reason why I mention this is people love comparing The Dark Knight to the Batman, and I want to halt that comparison because both movies are so different. Sure, they're both about Batman, but they're told very differently where the narrative provides different impact. In The Dark Knight, we have single scenes of just the Joker where he talks to mob bosses, he burns a pile of cash, he makes Harvey into Two-Face. But in the Batman, the only singular scenes we get of the Riddler are in the beginning and the end and any quick cut in between that just shows his face. We don't see him prepare, we don't see him plan, but who we see is Batman. And no movie has helped us understand Batman in this light ever. Because in Batman Begins, even though we see it, it's still told in epic format where we see Scarecrow start poisoning people. In the 1989 film, we just see Michael Keaton just roam around the streets of Gotham, talk to people. And then Batman vs. Superman as Batfleck, we see Batman as a foil to Superman. It's an epic again. But never do we see and understand the pain of loss that we see in this movie. We see Bruce is trying to figure out who he is. I know when I lost my grandma and my dad, I became a reclusive. I became angry, and like Matt Reeves has stated that he inspired this Bruce Wayne after Kurt Cobain. And Kurt Cobain throughout his life dealing with drugs and his own depression has felt almost akin to Bruce, hence why Something in the Way planes, or Something in the Wayne, if you will. And Bruce is literally unable to comprehend the fact that this has happened to him. He doesn't want to be a Wayne, but he has to be a Wayne, but the only reason why he's holding on is to the goodness that his dad stepped in front of him or protected him. I thought was great was this is also one of the first Batman movies in a while that we didn't see Batman's parents getting shot again. And so I was like, thank God. And it provides us that perspective of a young Bruce Wayne in his second year trying to figure things out. And no movie has done that before, as mentioned, but what makes it so spectacular is how we see him fail. And it provides the human experience that Batman can't do everything, that we as human beings can't do everything. And of course I mentioned that it's a response to those times around us, but Alfred says it best that Bruce Wayne and Batman can't be in two places at once. Bruce cannot be Batman, Batman cannot be Bruce, and when Selina Kyle and Catwoman says, like, who are you really under there? Pattinson doesn't know. He looks down, and that's so great that he acts with his eyes, because we see that he himself does not know who he is, just as a depressed kid does not know who they are without their parents. And so, just as we saw in the initiating action of the movie, Bruce is someone who's trying to figure out who he is, that he's so angry like the kid in the beginning, just trying to fight everything, that in reality all he wants is a hug. All he wants is to be understood and to give him the validation that what he's doing and how he feels is right, because all he's received throughout his life is to know how to fight. And Alfred tells him this, that, I'm sorry, Master Bruce, you needed a father. And I couldn't provide you that, but I can teach you how to survive and fight. And it's why Bruce has become the way he is. And so, another facet which makes it even better is the duality, again, of the Riddler and Bruce. In the prequel comic to the Batman, of course, no one needed to read it, but it provides the understanding that Bruce and the Riddler could have grown up the same as orphans who lost their parents, except the reason why Bruce is blamed all the time by the Riddler is he had money. There is that classist feeling about the movie and the commentary of, does money really make you happy? And it shows for Bruce that money didn't make him happy. Sure, he has all these fancy gadgets and everything, but he's still depressed. Yet the Riddler hates him for it. And it shows that understanding that when we place, especially for mental health, that, hey, you have all these things, you should be happy. Bruce isn't happy. He's really struggling, and throughout the movie, he's figuring that out. He starts in the beginning saying, I'm vengeance. But at the end of the movie, when he sees the Riddler goon saying that he's vengeance, he realizes that because he hasn't helped himself, he hasn't taken the time to process his grief, he's projected onto other people who have made that something worse, something more sinister. And so the only way that he can really be more is by becoming a hero. And in the previous Batman movies, we don't see that until either the trilogy of The Dark Knight Rises or at the end of The Dark Knight, when he becomes the hero that Gotham deserves, not the one it needs. But in this movie, we see his growth and character arc too there. Where, in all honesty, you can cut out the second act of the movie if you want to streamline it right away and have a perfect Bruce Wayne, but his Spanish isn't great. He's still learning on the job. He didn't know about what the Riddler was really talking about. He couldn't figure things out right away. And that himself shows the most human Batman we've had. And it also shows and depicts really what trauma does to someone. It shows that we as a society need to do more. We need to do better in helping not just everyday people, but men really cope with their trauma. Because everyone thinks that men are tough have to comprehend this on their own, but they need help, and Bruce needed help. And it was only until like he really realized the fault of his actions and getting called out by society, let alone Catwoman, for the hypocrisy of his job, does it show that he needs help. And so why I really give this a 5 out of 5 is, aside from the political commentary, the mental health struggles, the overarching theme of what the Batman is trying to convey is we need to be better as a society towards everyone. It's another commentary that we as one person can do more. Like the ending, I definitely agree, did feel rushed. When I rewatched it the second time, I realized that there's a throwaway line talking about the seawalls, but the ending really shows that, where when Batman takes off the cable and uses his batarang, he gets rebaptized, if you will, into something greater, into a figure. And if you will also, when he lights up the flare, he makes it a Red Sea, just like how in the Bible it's leading people into a new era, a new understanding, of opportunity for change. And so, kind of concluding everything, the Batman really not conveys that we must understand ourselves in order to help others, because we as human beings have the opportunity for change. We have the opportunity, unlike communicating in other Batman movies, which is all just punching and fighting, that we can be more than who we really are as the violent, primitive beings who are always vengeful and angry. We can use that and transform that fire, as the red was used as a motif for the entire movie, and transform that into a brighter sun for the next day and become something more. We don't have to be the Catwoman who uses guns and wants to carry out vengeance, but we can be the ones who can help people understand why their actions are wrong and inspire a new generation of people to take up the mantle of voice to root out corruption and to create a better Gotham for all. And so, kind of concluding again, this is why I gave the movie a 5 out of 5, because it is the deepest, truest character study into Batman that we've ever seen in a film. But yeah. Hopefully that swayed your minds a little bit more.
No, I'm rating it 5 out of 5, so.
No, for sure. And I do want to mention, like, it's valid. Every criticism of the movie is really valid. And I will say, like, the movie's not for everyone. In the Silver Age, we had Batman. Like, if you go on Cartoon Network on Saturdays in the late 2000s, you have Batman the Brave and the Bold, which is the smiling Batman for everyone. But to understand Batman is to understand that he is... which movie is it? He is a boy in a mask, like, who has parental problems, who has unresolved grief, and who has just the heart to wanting to help people, but not knowing how to do it. And so we can inspire people who, like, have the same grief to not turn out like the Riddler, but can help understand that, like, for example, just like the renewal fund was, like, unfunded, we need to really invest into resources and people who want to do better instead of want to do worse. Just like, again, tying to the social commentary, instead of storming a Capitol or storming a building full of hopeful people who want to try to make change, we should start making change by cooperating with one another and finding other solutions that can advance us as human beings instead of resorting to violence once again. And therefore, Martin Scorsese's commentary on how superhero movies need to transform is valid, because you know what, pick up a Marvel movie, you're going to see more punching around, but this movie was what allowed us to understand why we look up to superheroes and whatnot, is that human aspect. So, yeah, that's my review in a nutshell.
Oh, all right. Yeah. No, definitely great words, and definitely make a very good argument there for the 5-star reviews. So thank you very much for sharing that with us and with everyone, Gabe. We definitely appreciate that. Everyone listening at home, why don't you let us know what you think about the Batman? If you saw it, if you got a chance to see it in IMAX, what your review of it was, or what your favorite version of Batman is. Let us know, because that's fun, and we think that the Batman and talking about it, and how it might tie into Star Wars in some ways. We think all of that stuff is fun, and we think it's awesome that Gabe came back on to an episode with us. So, Gabe, thank you so much for joining us and talking Batman.
No, thank you. Thank you again, Brian and Cassia, for inviting me on. And again, just my parting words is, let's be people for and with others. Be in solidarity, show some kindness and compassion, and focus on service. The world is already struggling enough, but we as individual people have the power to make change.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Very well said, Gabe. Why don't you tell everyone listening where they can connect with you online if they want to learn more about your bright future, what you have going on. You're always up to doing something that looks really fun and really fulfilling every time I see you posting something on Instagram. So why don't you tell everyone where they can connect with you?
You can either find me on Facebook at Gabe Young. Come chat with me on Messenger. Be more than happy to help process and analyze and talk about what and whatever. You can find me on Discord at Young, Young, Knights 2, that's the number 2, with the 4 digits of, Discord, why are you doing this to me right now? I can probably drop that another time since it's not showing me, but yeah, you can find me there. Otherwise, Instagram at the Gabe Young. I'd be more than happy to chat about with you all there. So yeah, that's really about it. But again, thank you so much, Brian and Cassia, for having me. This was such an uplifting and salient conversation.
Yeah, and we'll definitely have you on again in the future. And I don't know, you left me with a lot of good thoughts and a lot of undeserved praise, but I always love validation, so thank you so much. Right. At times I was kind of blubbering, and that's why I didn't say anything, because I was just kind of almost about to cry, but so you left me with lots of good thoughts. I kind of remembered the gangster who's kind of unsure if they want to really go through with this, half Joker paint and half plain, no Joker makeup. And it's we talked a lot about duality, but it's we can destroy or protect. And I think you gave us a lot of things to think about and ways we can help protect people. And even if we have trauma or a bad day or a long Halloween or life has been rough, we can move forward and make positive changes in our life and be a force for good.
For sure. Kind of dropping 2 fun facts for everyone here, if they made it till the end, is that one character you mentioned, Cassia, the actor actually plays Tim Drake on the DC show Titans, and he was casted before he got the role on Titans. So you never know. Robert Pattinson.
That's so cool.
Yeah, Pattinson has mentioned that he wants a Robin, so who knows what may happen there. And the second thing is that cinematography. I know you mentioned that opening scene. By the way, quick tidbit: Batman said "Stop Asian Hate," just really promoting that.
Yeah.
The Batman cinematographer is the same cinematographer as Rogue One, and hence why they have your favorite scenes in all of cinema, Cassia, the hallway scene. So, 2 fun facts for everyone who joined us tonight.
Yeah, there you go. So, thank you very much again, Gabe, and hope everyone enjoyed this little chat about the Batman. Thanks for joining us. May the Force be with you. And I don't know, is there a good Batman line to sign off with, Cassia?
I'm Batman. I wasn't even trying there. My goodness, like that. My
Oh.
voice is just kind of dead now. But yeah,
I think the best Batman quote that I can state, probably not from this Batman movie, is the Christian Bale one where it's like, it's not who I am underneath, but what I do that defines me. And then it's going over to this movie, if I can remember that quote, let me find my notes, where Batman says, like, to kill someone is to be that killer himself. So always in our guises of human beings or our own names and identities, it's what we do as human beings to serve others that matters to us. So leaving everyone with that.